Send your true encounters to storiesforaries@gmail.com, and I might just read it in one of my next videos. Thanks for stopping by, and as always, thanks for listening. The following encounter was sent in by an individual that actually had one of his stories read on my channel before. He had another experience and asked if I wanted to share it with you all. The subject matter of this video is pretty tough, so viewer discretion is advised, and if you haven't heard his other encounters, I will link that video below. After talking to my friends and family in order to straighten out some of the dates I was unclear on, I believe I have found a correlation between all of my encounters. There is no comfortable way to say this, so I'll just say it. In August of last year, my pregnant girlfriend had a miscarriage. This is now the third child I have lost pre-birth. In my junior year of high school, I got my girlfriend at the time pregnant, and her parents forced her to get an abortion before I was even aware of her pregnancy. We were kept separated and she broke off contact with me shortly after. I haven't spoken to her since. This occurred a few months after my first encounter with the thing, and the emotional fallout may have contributed to me putting that first encounter out of my head so quickly. In June of 2006, sometime after my second encounter, my girlfriend at the time was in a car accident when her friend lost control of the car in the rain and hit a telephone pole, with my girlfriend riding shotgun. My girlfriend's chest and abdomen hit the dashboard, causing her to break a few ribs, which caused a minor internal laceration. She was taken into surgery and the surgeons, God bless those people, were able to fix the damage and save her life. However, it was at this point that we learned that she was about 1 month pregnant, and due to the injury from the accident, she was unable to bring the baby to term and a medically induced abortion was necessary. If I recall correctly, insurance paid most of the plastic surgery bill for the scar on her chest, and eventually I paid for the massive tattoo to cover it up at her request. In all honesty, I never really cared about the scar, but it obviously affected her mentally. She was often overdramatically referring to herself as damaged or broken, neither of which I ever saw as accurate. I stayed and supported her through the recovery, but this was the beginning of the end of our relationship, as she became hooked on painkillers shortly after. I stayed as long as I could, and some people tell me I stayed longer than I should have, but I really cared about the person I knew before the drugs. Soon, however, it became abundantly clear to me that after a few years of fighting for her, the person I had once known was never coming back. This has eaten at me ever since, and I often wonder if I could have been around more for her, but I was the only one working at the time, and I had to double down on it to support both of us. I still have yet to recover totally from the financial hole that this has put me in, and as far as I know, she has yet to kick her addiction. We haven't talked in years. Again, I believe the trauma and fallout are what made me put the encounter out of my mind, and I have never made a connection between the two events. In July of last year, just shortly after the third encounter, it happened again when a friend and I hooked up on a whim. She had an abortion just weeks after us discovering her pregnancy. I all but begged her not to, but she was dead set on getting it done because she had a boyfriend that I was previously unaware of, so I just ended up letting it happen. It tore me apart inside, and I had been pretty damn solitary since then. That is, until I met the woman I'm currently dating. She is so amazing, and I love her deeply. She is smart, beautiful, thoughtful, and so much more mature than me. She makes me a better man just being around. And she's pulled me out of my self-imposed solitary confinement, then somehow managed to get me feeling like myself again rather quickly. This is where I want it all to end, but of course, almost immediately after we started dating, that little thing came back in the weirdest goddamn way. I made sure to know as many of the details as I could this time, since so many people asked good questions last time and I couldn't answer because I didn't think to remember. I again tried and failed to stay out of the narrative tone, but either way, I think I still did well enough, getting out as many details as factually accurate as possible. The latest encounter took place on Friday, August 5th, 2019, at approximately 7:30 p.m. as I was walking from my Jeep to the duplex I live in, after getting back from work. The sun was setting behind me as I pulled into the short driveway in front of my home. The sun had gone down to the point where it was below the treetops, yet still not at the horizon, so there was some ambient light left in the day. It was incredibly hot that day, like pushing 100, and it had only cooled off a little bit by that point, with the humidity still being 100%. My neighborhood is lower middle class, so all of the houses are small, but there is still a bit of space between each of them, giving everyone a little elbow room at least. The street I live on is a cut-through between two parts of our small town, so even though we are pretty rural, the road out front actually gets pretty busy sometimes. My place is just a few yards off the street, and I have a backyard that extends out about 20 feet behind the building before stopping abruptly at the patch of trees dividing my neighbor's lawn from mine. As usual, I parked in the gravel about 20 feet from the edge of the screened-in patio, where my girlfriend was sitting on the porch swing. She gets off work much earlier than I do and is usually there with a drink in hand each weekday when I get home. I parked on the left side of the house, grabbed my things, got out, and started walking around to the front of my Jeep towards the house. As soon as I got out of my vehicle, I began hearing a clicking sound in my ears. I thought it was just sinus pressure or something at first, because it sounded like it was inside my ear canal. My girlfriend was on the phone, but she smiled and waved at me as I walked up, and it was at that exact moment when I looked up at her that I saw it out of the corner of my eye. I quickly looked over, and there it was, clear as can be, standing at the edge of the little patch of trees. Per usual, as soon as I saw it saw me. For anyone that hasn't read my first post, the thing is roughly 3 feet tall and shaped like a starving child, with a possible deformity. It has no discernible features or shape, and is essentially just a flat black space in the place where its substance and form should be. It's almost as if it was cut out of reality, or like the physical space that it occupies is just totally voided out negative space. Something very different that freaked me out about this encounter happened in the instant we first noticed each other. When the thing turned its head area towards me and leaned back off the tree a bit, I saw its arms were extending maybe 25 or 30 feet straight up the trunk of the tree and into some of the leafier branches at the top. This completely froze me in my tracks for a few seconds after swearing that I would be ready for it the next time it showed up. Its arms were thin and filled with the same empty blackness as before, but they, like its movements, just didn't seem to be natural for it. Its arms were almost fluid-like in their motions, or slithering like snakes, sort of. It's so tough to explain because the whole thing never does seem to belong in its surroundings at all, but again, the way that it moves its body just really doesn't line up with the way it's shaped. I'm still not sure if it's the actual motions of the thing or if it's just the lack of any three-dimensional form, but looking at this thing is so disorienting. It's hard to tell what it's even doing when it moves, or how big it really is, or even how far away it is. I could only be sure of its location this time because I knew where the tree was that it was standing against. This all happened in about 3 seconds, and just like every other time, I have a brief second or two where my brain is just unable to process what I'm seeing in front of me, even though I've seen it several times before now. It was just so much more creepy this time with those crazy arms, like a demented, evil little inflatable tube man, which I'm sure sounds kind of funny until you actually see it. I hadn't had a good look at this thing since the first time, and it's been so long that memory was slowly fading. It was roughly the same as before in shape and size, but no eyes at all this time that I could see, and yet again, I am struck by how infinitely dark this thing is. Every time that I have seen the thing, it has been as if I have spotted it doing something that it shouldn't have been doing. Although now I don't believe it to be as surprised as it seemed to be to see me. If it weren't for the jarring and bizarre sight of its long, clumsy arms, I might have reacted quicker, but I did all right this time, I guess. At that moment, right then, I was totally sure I was going to get a picture of it, or that when I yelled to my girlfriend, she would then turn and see it standing there as well. I didn't react the way I did previous times for sure, because I dropped my tool bags on the ground and went running into the backyard at a full sprint while yelling my girlfriend's name. I guess I didn't seem excited enough when I called out to her, because my girlfriend just held up the "wait a minute" finger. I reached for my phone, but immediately realized that it was in the backpack that I had just dropped, which caused me to briefly freeze and almost go back for it. but then I kind of just double-clutched the decision instead and took off running after it. I honestly thought I had a better chance of getting to it than getting back to my bag, digging out my phone, and then running over to get a picture. Well, I must have lost sight of it for a split second during that brief pause, because I can't remember how it got into the next position I saw it in. It had somehow now gone from having its head turned towards me and standing on two legs to being down on all fours, bounding away from the tree and back into the brush. It happened so fast it was like it didn't turn or move to be facing in the other direction. It just all of a sudden was facing the other direction, in a different shape, moving in a totally different way. I was about 15 feet away from it as it ran off and just kind of disappeared behind some bushes, just like when I saw it across the field in front of my friend's house. Also, I'm not sure if I mentioned this, but from this encounter and the previous one, I got the impression that it was more comfortable on all fours. I didn't or couldn't hear any sound at all coming from the creature via vocalization or interaction with the environment. Possibly I didn't hear anything this time because of the tapping sound in my ears, or because my neighborhood gets a little noisy. I didn't follow the thing into the woods because simultaneously when I lost sight of it, I also got distracted by the sight of something up in the tree out of the corner of my eye. When I got to the tree, I looked up just in time to see both of the thing's arms sliding or slithering back up the tree, moving like a tape measure made of black spaghetti being retracted back into its holster. It looked like it had either detached its arms and ran off without them, or even maybe that there was another one up there in the tree that had been reaching down to it, which is precisely what I thought it was doing at the time. For a brief moment, I even idiotically felt that I had cornered another one of them up in the tree and that I might also catch it somehow. Regardless, at this point, I was now standing at the base of the tree, looking way up the trunk where I saw its hands, which I haven't seen any other time. Its slender fingers were tapping on a high branch, making a typing motion, as if it had a keyboard up there, sitting on the tree limb. It was then that I realized what the sound in my ears was. It was the very distinct sound of typing on a keyboard. Although the noise in my ear was not any louder now that I was closer to the tree than it was when I was across the backyard. The noise wasn't loud in general, but it sounded like it was right inside my ear, and it sounded familiar, like the keyboard on my computer inside my home. It happened so fast again, and after just a second or two, its arm slid up behind the bottom of the branch as its hands simultaneously stopped typing and pulled down behind the top of the same tree branch where they both disappeared completely. The lack of shadow and depth, put against something that does reflect light, is a difficult thing to explain until you actually see it. It makes it near impossible to tell distances or what direction anything is moving, so it almost looks like it's always coming towards you or going away from you. As soon as the arms and hands were gone entirely, I briefly checked behind me and around me to make sure it still wasn't there. I then turned back and walked around the tree a couple of times, but I saw nothing up in the sparse covering the tree provided. I checked all around and even threw some rocks up there to see if I could get something to move around, but obviously nothing. The sound in my ears stopped as quickly as it started, and I knew then that the thing was gone. By this point, my girlfriend had hung up the phone and was standing in the doorway in the porch shouting to me, asking what's going on, and I'm now down in the backyard wondering how the hell to explain it. When I asked my girlfriend if she saw that, she responded with those two deflating words, "Saw what?" It made my heart sink so low because I knew it had just happened again. It was right there and apparently caught in an awkward position with seemingly nowhere to go. My girlfriend was right there for validation as well, I thought, and yet again I got nothing. I explained it away as saying that I thought I saw a black bear, but it must have been a raccoon, and my girlfriend shrugged it off quickly enough only after giving me hell for throwing rocks at what I foolishly told her was a raccoon. Not only is this thing incredibly frustrating with how it continually is able to avoid giving me proof, but the whole scenario just made me feel like an idiot. I feel like it tricked me for some reason, but I don't know why, which in itself is also eating me up inside. I've gotten over trying to piece together to specifics each event, as they're also similar in some ways but different in others. The arms, the flashing eyes, turning into a dog thing. I mean, what the hell is all of that? It wasn't until a bit later that night that the full extent of what this encounter meant dawned on me. My girlfriend was working on her laptop and I just kept staring at her. She's so beautiful even with the cold blue reflection of the computer screen filling her glasses and covering her big brown eyes. I distinctly remember a moment that night when she looked up and caught me staring at her. I smiled at her and she smiled back and then asked, "What?" And I, of course, said, "Nothing." That moment broke my heart because I knew then that I wouldn't be able to give her what she ultimately wanted in a child, or not even that I couldn't, but that if I do, it will inevitably be taken away. It is now my opinion that this thing is some kind of bad omen, and I am terrified. I just don't think I can go through all that loss again. My girlfriend and I are still together, but there has been no talk of babies yet, thankfully. But I would be lying if I said I didn't think I was wasting her time every now and again. I know she wants to start a family someday, but I'm so scared, and not for me, but for her, as she deserves so much better than what I know is coming. She deserves to know, but I don't even know how to begin to tell her. She's extremely skeptical of the paranormal, just as I used to be. It hurts so much to go through losing a child, even one you never got to meet. I love her so much, and I don't want her to feel the kind of pain and suffering that I have felt from my loss. My hands are trembling as I'm typing this, and I can't stop grinding my teeth. I hate this thing. I hate it so much.